Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel after a fairly lengthy break away from creating and sharing content with you. If you have been with my channel for a little while, you may have noticed at the start of the year I just shared a little update that I was going to be taking a break from sharing new content on my channel. Right now it is July 2022. Towards the end of 2021, I found that I was really struggling with my creativity. I was struggling to find the motivation to sit down and create, and I think it was a combination of things that were going on in my personal life, along with commitments that I had with my scrapbooking and design team. And it just felt like, rather than being something that I fully enjoyed doing, it was becoming a bit of a pressure on my creativity. So I made a choice to step back from sharing. I had intended that it was only going to last for a few months, but I found that I was really enjoying just sitting down and creating for the sake of creating. When the mood struck, when I had some time, I also in the last few months have had some pretty big assignments going on with my studies, and that took up a lot of my time. But in that time, I have still been creating, as I said, just when the mood struck, and I found that I've rediscovered what it is that I like about scrapbooking, and I've rediscovered the style and the aesthetic that really works well for me, and I think it's going to be reflected in what I show you here, that I'm tending more towards the simpler side of things. One of the projects that I embarked on during my break was going through all the photos that I have saved on my computer, having a really good organization project with those, and sorting out what I want to scrapbook and what will just stay as a digital file. And in doing that, I realized that I have a massive amount of photos and stories that I want to document. And if I was to continue the way that I had been going with my creation of layouts, it was something that was never going to get finished, and I would always have in the back of my mind as yet another pressure to get those stories done. So I've sat down and I've spent a really long time thinking about what I enjoy and what I want to get out of this, and I've realized that if I'm going to achieve what I want and still enjoy the process of creating, that I need to make things simpler. In the last 6 months, this just reflects some of what I have been creating, but I have chosen these ones here just to show you a little flip through. So if you are new to my channel, you might get a little bit of an idea about who I am and what kind of scrapbooking that I do. If you have been with me for a while, hopefully you can see just a little bit of an evolution in the way that I am creating. I do have some old process videos that are sitting on my computer, unedited and unpublished, and over the next couple of months I'll be going through and getting those up on my channel while I spend some time filming and creating fresh new content. But with all of that little scrappy update chat out of the way, let's get stuck into flipping through this really nice healthy stack of layouts that I have here. So to begin with, this layout, I'm a member of Dearly Dee's Patreon, and I find it just so inspiring, and she's been really helpful in inspiring me during this little bit of downtime to play and to work on projects and with supplies that, you know, I perhaps haven't done more recently. So for this layout, this was one of her monthly challenges, and I dug deep into my stash. I had a little collection of random, really old papers and embellishments. I'm talking, you know, maybe 10 years old, I'm not quite sure. I don't recall the date of them. But I just had a little bag with scattered pieces, and I challenged myself here to pull those out and to create a layout that still reflected the style and the aesthetic that I love today. And I'm super duper happy with this. As I said, it's quite simple. There's a little bit of embellishing. The photos are really the hero here, and I've got my journaling, lots of white space, which I really, really love, and lots of layers. So I think all up, this layout probably took me about 20 to 30 minutes to create. And this is what I know I'm looking for in my scrapbooking now. I want these fast layouts, I want simple, I want impactful, and this really, really says to me where I'm heading in my scrapbooking journey. Another one here that was created off the back of a challenge that was in Dealy Dee's Patreon group. She has monthly challenges every month, and this one was one that inspired me as well. Here I've used some Rosie Studio products. I have a bunch of cut files that I have already cut and I have sitting in a folder so that they're ready to go when I sit down and I don't want to fuss around with my Silhouette software or my machine. I have a whole bunch of cut files that are in a file and they're all ready to go, and I can just grab them and make some layouts. So this one did take me a little bit more time, just with the backing of the cut file, and there's a little bit of mixed media here, but again, it's quite simple. It's really nice and clean. There's lots of white space, some nice textured layers, and if I can get up close, the layering of mixed media, which I really love for creating a background. This was another one that was created for a challenge that Dealy Dee gave. Again, I challenged myself to use some of my older embellishments. I have a really big basket, like I'm sure many of us do, of embellishments that I have hoarded for quite a long time, and in it were these fabric rosettes. I think they were from Maya Road was where they were from, and I've had them in my stash for so long, and it's one of those things that I love the idea of, but I've never really been able to make work on a layout. So I challenged myself here to bring them out and to use them. So I've got one whole one here, and I've got one that I cut in half and just tucked on either side, and I'm really, really happy, first of all, that I used those up, but secondly that I was able to make use of them again in a way that suits my style and my aesthetic now. So it's an older product that I'm making work with some newer products here. Now, I also have a huge stash of collection kits from Felicity Jane amongst many other manufacturers, and I've hoarded them. I will be completely honest. I have hoarded them for a really long time because they're so beautiful, and you know, I want to make use of them, but I've decided that I need to start using things up if I want to clear some space in my very small little scrappy room. I need to start making use of my products. Now, at this time, I was struggling a little bit with coming up with my own ideas for layouts. So I did something which I have done many times in the past, and which I highly recommend if you have been feeling a little bit of a creative block like I have. I went onto the Felicity Jane blog, and for each kit I've looked at some of the design team projects, and I've either used those to scrap lift or I've used them as inspiration. I also grabbed some of their sketches and used those again either to create directly from the sketch or to use the sketch as an inspiration. So a lot of these Felicity Jane layouts that you're going to see me flipping through now will have either come as a scrap lift of one of their design team members, or inspired by one of their design team projects, or inspired by one of their sketches. So with this one here, I have had these photos sitting on my hard drive for a really long time intending to print them out and scrap them. It's a story from a trip that I took many, many years ago before I had children, where I went to Everest Base Camp. So I finally decided to get them printed and to get them documented. I scrap lifted this layout, or I drew inspiration from one of the design team members. I've got my really long bit of journaling here because there was quite a story that I wanted to tell, and that's another story that is down and documented and ready to pop away. This is another Felicity Jane layout. Again, this was inspired by a design team project. I think the project that I may have drawn inspiration from for this one was actually a traveler's notebook. And as you may be aware, with a traveler's notebook, if you have the spread open, the dimensions are very similar to a 12 by 12 layout. So I drew my inspiration from that one. I've got some really nice texture here. Again, although it's visually very interesting, it's quite a simple layout. There's nothing too technical, there's nothing too time consuming. It's just creating some nice layers, adding some interesting elements here and there. And still lots of, you know, nice clean white space for me. And another one that is a Felicity Jane layout. This is again another older photo that I have. I now have a box or a few boxes of photos that I have printed out, and I am gradually going through and getting at all of the photos that I have that I want to scrapbook printed, so that I've got them all there ready to go, and I don't have to think about sitting down at my computer and sorting through and deciding what I want to scrapbook. I can just pick up a box, pick up a handful of photos and sit down and start creating and get these stories told. Now for this one, it's a beautiful photo. It really, there was no story behind the photo itself, but these are photos that I want to get printed and I want to get into my kids' albums, because look at that, it's just so sweet. So when I have things like this where there's no particular story to go with the photo, what I am doing is I'm finding some quotes. I have lots of quotes saved on Instagram, on Pinterest. I also search for them, and I'm finding some quotes that I want, that have a message that I want to share with my children, and that's what's gone on to this one here. It's a quote that I have made into a little bit of a message from me to my daughter. This is another Felicity Jane project. One of the kits came with these really cute little tiny envelopes. The tiny envelopes, again, are something that I find a little bit difficult to scrapbook with. I don't tend to have a lot of interactive elements in my layouts. If I do, it will be the hidden journaling or something like that. But the envelopes, the way that I create, they don't really make a lot of sense for my own personal scrapbooking style, but certainly as elements on the page, they work really, really well here. Again, simple in design, a nice simple grid layout with lots of journaling down here just to tell that story. This is another layout. I'm really trying to make use of my Felicity Jane kits here and use up as much as I can. This one's an 8.5 by 11. I have also, in the last few months while I have been creating just for the sake of creating, I've also rediscovered my love for the smaller style or the smaller scale of layout, the 8.5 by 11. I find that it's much simpler to create because you have far less space. The design choices are slightly more limited, which when you're struggling with a bit of a creative block can be easier, because if you've got a photo, that's going to take up most of the real estate on your page and everything else kind of just falls around it. So for this one, most of the interest in this page was created with these pattern paper layers, and if you look up close here for this what would we call it, like a rust colored page, I have actually run that through my Cuttlebug with an embossing folder just to add a little bit more texture there. And this is another Felicity Jane layout. Now I can't actually recall if this was something that I created after viewing a design team project or if this is something that I came up with on my own. I have these, they're fairly new to me, these diamond shape dies, which I purchased recently. I believe they're Waffle Crafts is the brand, and I wanted to get them out and make use of them. So I just grabbed a whole bunch of scraps that were left over from this kit that I had been working with and punched out loads of different shaped diamonds. As you can see, some of them I cut out into a frame and then layered those up. A nice big title. So thickers is another thing that I have realized that I hoard way too much, and I'm going to be making a real effort to bring out my thickers and to get them onto as many layouts as I possibly can so that I can use all of those up, because goodness knows I don't need to be hoarding them. There will always be new products coming out that I can buy if I run out. Now this one is definitely a scrap lift. The cut file is not the same as the one that was used on the original, but I really loved the idea of that sort of wreath that was cut off at the top as to create a home for the photo. So all of the visual weight is sitting up in the top half of the layout here, and then I've got just that nice clean white down the bottom to house my journaling. I really love this layout. I think I may use this as sort of a foundation for future layouts. What I find is that when I have created a layout that I love the design, I will keep a record of that somewhere, and then when I'm stuck for what to create in future, I can refer back to previous layouts that I've made and use those designs as inspiration for new layouts. This I'm pretty sure was based on a sketch. I really loved the horizontal panels here, and for mine, because I didn't have a huge amount of papers left in this kit, I've just stuck to using the one patterned paper, and in between I've just got some mixed media. I can't remember if that was an acrylic paint or a watercolor paint now, but I've just added the paints in between. Again, it adds a little bit of visual interest. It's not just the same thing happening repeatedly down the page. It's something a little bit different, but it doesn't add any bulk to my page, which again is something that I am trying to be more conscious of. I sat down and I went through all of my scrapbook albums and my layouts, and another thing that I've realized is, as much as I love the layers and the look of dimension on my layouts, it's just not practical, because it means that I can't fit as much into my albums, and I'm quite restricted on the amount of space that I have for storage here. And so I want to make sure that I am getting as many layouts into each album as I possibly can, and the way to do that is for me to make them as flat as possible when I can. Now these two layouts actually go side by side. It's a whole bunch of photos that I took of my daughter. It was quite a few years ago now. It was this 2019, so 3 years ago. She was just looking really cute. I was playing around with my camera, trying to work with some different settings, and I had this series of photos, and they really captured her personality at the time. So again, thinking about the ways that I can get these photos scrapped and the stories documented as quickly as possible, this is a really good way for me. I've got this layout here which I spent quite a bit of time on creating, and then a really simple grid layout to get the remainder of those photos down, and some journaling, and that's documented, and now all of those photos are done and ready to go into an album. So I think it was last year, probably mid last year, I created a layout for the Cut to You design team, which was documenting some photos of a photo of my daughter and one of my nieces. She had come over for a play date, and the kids had decided that they wanted to do makeovers and put some makeup on, and the results were really just, I think they speak for themselves. The makeup that they applied was just beautiful. So I have a 12 by 12 layout which has got the photo of my daughter and my niece, but I also had these individual photos of my kids, and they were too good not to document. So I knew that I wanted to get them down onto a page, and again, thinking about ways to make things a little bit easier and quicker for me. This is one of my favorite things to do now, where I have photos or stories that I want to include in both albums, is that I will start and create one layout and then create an identical layout either with the same or similar products for the other one. So you can you can see here that the design is exactly the same, the layout is the same, I've just used a different set of products. So these are all from Cocoa Vanilla. I believe this is the My Happiness collection, and I may have a couple of extra things that I've brought in here from my stash. I had this little tassel piece here from the embellishment, the ephemera pack. I didn't have another tassel to go on my daughter's page, so I have just created that myself using some paper and a tassel die that I have. And my journaling is tucked up here at the top of the page, because again, there was quite a lot that I wanted to say, and because it is sitting behind the page, I've created a little pocket for it on each one, and I've made it so that there's a tab down the bottom so that you can't actually pull it all the way out, just to prevent that from getting lost. So those two are ready to go. Again, this is the Cocoa Vanilla My Happiness. I don't have a lot left of this particular collection, so I've kept it out so that I can try and make use of it. This was one of the pattern papers which had this beautiful wreath design on it, so I've fussy cut that wreath out. I've adhered it to my page, and then if you can see, I've just run it through my sewing machine, a line of stitching a few times all the way around, and then popped some foam dots underneath these floral pieces just to give them a little bit more dimension. I also fussy cut a whole heap of butterflies from the 6x6 or the 6x8 paper pad, and I've adhered those around the wreath. A couple of photos in the middle with some paper layers behind it, lots of journaling, and that one's all done. I did get a few, not many, a few wedding layouts completed this May. I like to work on my wedding layouts in May because that's the month of our anniversary. Now, last year I had created a page for a YouTube hop using this cut file, and once I finished it, I just really wasn't happy with it. It was too busy, there was too much going on. In my original, I had 3 photos going down the side, so that it meant that you couldn't actually really read a lot of the words here, and I straight away knew that I wanted to remake it. So this is the remake, and what I found once I had backed this cut file and popped it down onto my white background, I realized that I didn't want to use the same photos that I had used in the original, so I have this photo instead, which is a group shot of us from our wedding. Popped that on, and I am so much happier with this remade layout. It's bright, it's clean, it's uncluttered, and yeah, definitely much happier with that. There we go. This is the only other wedding layout that I created this year. I have a cut file here, a love heart cut file, which I turned into a giant shaker. If you can see, there's lots of sequins in there. This photo of my husband and I before we went into our wedding reception. And what inspired me for this page was this text here. This is actually stickers from a Kaiser Craft collection, and because I had 2 of them, I stuck them on top of each other and then mounted them on a little bit of foam. And yeah, so that title was the inspiration for this page, so everything else kind of came from that one. These here, they're in page protectors because they're ready to go. So one of the things that I do with my kids, or I have done over the last couple of years, on the first day of school, is I take a photo of them, of course, as we do. I also have a little interview, which is something that I have made up myself, some questions that I ask them at the start of every year, and I get them to do a self-portrait. Now this is from 2021, so this was the year that my son first started at an early learning program. I took his photo, and if I flick forward to this year, I love being able to compare, of course, the photos to see how much he's grown, to be looking at the 2 sets of interview questions to see what's changed. But I think one of my favorite things is looking at the evolution of their drawing. So this was his self-portrait at the beginning of 2021 when he would have been 3, and this was his self-portrait at the beginning of this year, 2022, when he's 4. I really love being able to see those side by side, and because this is something that I know that I'm going to do year after year, I have made it easier for myself to document by creating a template in Photoshop and just using the same format for this, and then having that little self-portrait over the back. So that again is another way that I'm trying to streamline my process and make things easier. That's my son's, and here is my daughter starting pre-primary, starting year 1, and again seeing the evolution in her self-portraits. It's just one of my favorite things. Now, this little stack here represents the direction that I'm going to be taking in my scrapbooking moving forward from actually from 2021 onwards. So again, thinking about how I want to make things simpler and easier for me to get stories documented and photos included in albums. This was a trip to the zoo that we took for my son's birthday a couple of years ago, and I had a whole heap of photos that I wanted to include. Now, in previous approaches, I would have thought that or felt that I had to create a layout for each photo or for each set of photos, but I have quickly realized that that's not necessarily true, and in fact probably the best way for me to achieve what I want to achieve in my memory keeping is to combine traditional layouts, which I love to create, with some pocket pages, which help me to get stories told quickly. So what this little stack here is a combination of scrapbooking layouts and pocket pages. I looked at the collection of photos that I had. I decided which ones I really wanted to have a layout to themselves and which could go into pocket pages. And then I've used the same collection, which is from Uniquely Creative, to create this series. So this is a full page layout with a photo of all of us when we arrived at the zoo. And then because this is the story of my son's birthday, some photos of him saying happy birthday. A little bit of documenting about our trip to the zoo, why we were going, and then I've got as many photos as I can and filled in some of the pages with journal cards and embellishing. There's some photos of the animals that we saw while we were at the zoo, a little list style journaling of some of the highlights of the day. This was another photo that because it was his birthday and I wanted to make it special, this was a photo that I wanted to have just of him on its own page. Again, really simple, a cut file, my favorite, lots and lots of layered mixed media behind that. A couple more photos of him on their own layout. And then a little 6x12, which was just a 12x12 page protector that I've trimmed down because I didn't need the full width of it. Again, with some more photos of animals. And this one here, I only had the one photo to go on this one, so I created a filler card up here and then added some more journaling down the bottom here. And then to finish it off, just this photo of him. It was getting very tired and having a little bit of a meltdown, and that finishes that off. So I really love that all of this, creating all of these together probably took me about, I will say it took me a day, but there's a lot there that I got down, and I love combining the pocket pages with the scrapbook layouts. So my approach going forward is When I've reorganized my photos in Lightroom from 2021, my albums are going to have a blend of layouts with pocket pages. So from 2021, I am not going to be doing Project Life albums in the sense that I have been doing them before. It will be a family album which will have a combination of layouts and pocket pages, and then each of the kids' albums which will also have a combination of layouts and pocket pages. I would love to hear from you down in the comments. Any thoughts, any ideas, any suggestions, just to say hello, anything that you have. It has been a long time away, and I know I've got lots of really lovely, loyal subscribers who I hope are still sticking around with me, and I would love to hear from you. I will leave it there, and I look forward to sharing more content with you soon.